Good morning, Councillor Richter. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Wendy, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. Is the mayor speaking? I can't hear him.
No, we haven't quite got started yet.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No worries.
But we will get started now. Thank you and welcome. Welcome here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular acknowledge our relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Samiamo, and Matsqui First Nations. With that, I'll bring the regular meeting of the Township Langley Council to order. And the first item is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Ferguson moves, second by Councillor Davis. Councillor Woodward on the agenda.
Mic gonna come on? There we go. Yeah, I'd like to move that I remove P1 from the agenda. I won't be moving that motion.
P1. Okay, so with P1. G or T? P1. Okay, so it's an amendment to remove P1. So we'll just do a quick seconder on the amendment. Second by Councillor Kunst. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So the agenda as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move on to adoption minutes. The regular council meeting of October the 18th. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councillor Kunst, second by Councillor Arneson. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Richter? Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
On page 18, the names Froze, Kunst, Long, and Woodward are there, but it doesn't say why they're there for. Were they opposed?
The clerk is checking. Just yeah. Page 18.
On page 14.
Yeah, the clerk is checking, so we'll just give the clerk a minute.
Yeah, it's 14. Sorry, I have the wrong number there. It's 14.
Thank you. We'll have that corrected.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. No delegations. There's no presentations. We start off with reports to council. The first report is write-off of uncollectible property taxes, and I'll look for a motion. Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Arneson. Any discussion? Councillor Richter?
Yes, I have two questions. First of all, is this an increasing trend that we're seeing, particularly amongst the manufactured home properties in Langley? And second question is, ultimately, who pays these taxes? Is it the township or the province, or do we just forego them, period? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Backen?
Thank you, Your Worship. So it's not really an increasing trend. It's an anomaly that exists when there is mobile homes, modular homes that are considered to be chattels, and they're on provincial or federal property. We cannot tax the property, therefore we tax the chattel, the event, the thing itself. And the challenge we face is that we have no enforcement mechanism. We cannot put them up for tax sale. They remain out there, and so we try alternate collection methods. And in this case, the party effectively moved off after a number of years, and what was left behind was so I guess, in such poor shape that it was ultimately demolished. In which case, then it's simply reduced. It actually is reflected as a reduction in revenue. So effectively, it's a reduction in our revenue. No one pays it. It simply reduces our revenue, and the role is corrected.
Okay, thank you. Council Ferguson.
Yes, thank you. I find this very, very interesting because, I learned nothing here. I didn't realize that this was happening. Now, do you think the province, if I may, through the chair to staff, would maybe take a look at this and just maybe do some housekeeping and clean it up for future? Because Langley's not the only community with mobile homes or manufacturing homes, if I may, through the chair.
Your Worship, they could, but they likely would not. And the reason is, if these were on private property, they could be reflected on the tax rolls there. But because it's on provincial or federal property, there's no ability to reach through to attach the land. So it's a relatively small number of issues that exist per municipality. So while they certainly could address it, I suppose, by making it such that the chattels, the mobile home, could be sold, I don't know if it's a big enough issue for them to address.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further discussion. I'll call a question. All those in favor and opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Move on to number 2, portable stage and ramp for the George Preston Recreation Center. And this is a portable stage and ramp for the arena. Moved by Councilor Ferguson, second by Councilor Kunst. And discussion, Councilor Richter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 questions here. Why is a portable ramp $50,000? Like, what exactly are we getting for the $50,000? Seems like a lot of money for a ramp.
Mr. Macker.
Second question is, what's the expected lifespan of this ramp? And third question, on page 3, it references the possibility of a rental fee. I'm wondering if we can require that, especially if other neighboring communities decide to use our ramp. And also, I'd like to know what the expected annual maintenance costs of the ramp will be. Thank you.
Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll start it off. So I guess why the cost is such as it is, the stage, if you will, and the ramps to be portable are built in sections. So usually it'd be a 4x8 section, and it would be raised off the ground 1, 2, or 3 feet, whatever the specs require. So you can tell by that size, then you may need 10 or 12 of these things to have an effective area. And then in addition, there must be the ramp that's built up or acquired to put it into place. The rise and the run of the ramps are very small because it's really designed for the wheelchair accessibility or the I guess, assisted movement devices. So as a consequence, 2 things: they have to be fairly large, and they have to actually withstand some significant weights in that's being used by some of these devices that are relatively heavy. You can imagine a chair with a battery pack on it, for example. The other part of it is that the cost is references to being up to $50,000 because it depends on if we can go through a more competitive process, although there's not very many folks out there. We might be able to lower the cost, but it's something that we think was created by reference to the letter that triggered this in terms of the accessibility issues that arise. The lifespan of these is fairly significant. You can never say for sure, but I would say by thinking of other such equipment, probably in the neighborhood of 20 years. Again, it depends if the specs change or in terms of how well these things are maintained. They are metal. They're made entirely from metal, even with a metal riser. And finally, the fees. If it was to be utilized in other facilities or for other purposes, we could charge a fee, meaning that if it wasn't to be used for disabled access, I think we could charge a fee. If it's to be used for the access for those that have challenges, then I think it would be very difficult for us to justify the fee because we're really just retrofitting something that is now required pursuant to the various rules, regulations, and policies that are in place for access for those that have challenges.
No, I wasn't meaning that so much as, let's say Langley City might want to borrow our stage. Mm-hmm. Would a rental fee be charged to them for use of the stage as well as the ramp?
And certainly it could be. And in fact, if it was being used for some other purpose, so for example, this doesn't make any sense, but a wedding, for example, because you wanted to use it for that purpose, that's a private purpose. We could also look at some fees that could be associated with that.
And the annual maintenance fees? Will there be any?
Really just the storage costs, and if we can work it appropriately, it would be stored, I think, on site. In the worst case, it'd have to be stored off site, but there are many solutions, even including building small structures or containers if that's appropriate. So it would be fairly minimal in terms of any maintenance. The units themselves, as long as they're kept dry and clean and whatnot, don't require any maintenance other than perhaps painting every 5 or 10 years for the risers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis? Yeah, it'll come on.
Audio, okay, thank you. I guess maybe my question was answered. I'm just going to expand it a little bit. It's up to $50,000 for the ramp, but is there no?
It's for the staging area and the ramp. So you're looking at maybe 4 by 8 times a number, we'll say 10 or 12, so 12 units, and then plus the ramp itself.
Okay, but is there any money put aside to store it? And will it only be at Preston? And you said no, maybe we could move it around. Yeah. And the last question is, we have they commented on an old wood one that we have. We only have a couple. Will we disregard the wood one, or will we keep the wood one? Yeah, because the report comes in at, we have an event and we need it for this event, November 22nd, I believe, or whatever it was. So we're not just doing it for that, because we're going to do it for so that just comments.
So the two parts to it, I guess, are the existing situation. It would be a structure that probably at the time it was initiated probably would have met the various codes and regulations, but it certainly isn't current. And in terms of the stresses it faces when it has a significant load-bearing weight, it becomes a bit of a challenge. It's worked fine so far, but I would say that whatever we have is reaching the end of its life. The second component then is we would hope to be able to store it on site using some creative methods, either some space that may exist, or in a worst case, a container type structure, provided it actually it fits in with the environment. We'd have to assess that. So the cost should be relatively minimal in terms of the maintenance or the storage of it. The maintenance, again, would be primarily painting, I think is what it would amount to on a every multi-year basis, depending upon how it's used. The more it's used off-site, which it could be used off-site, it's just the transportation of it that becomes the issue, because the biggest expense is then your transportation costs. The more it's likely to be, I guess, scratched and dented and banged up. I would think that it would be used off-site somewhat, but we would be encouraging it for off-site use for those parties that need access as opposed to commercial activities, because it's going to cost a lot to maintain it. We'd have to build that into the rate structure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you. Move on to the 2021 Housing Action Plan, and this is a motion to endorse the 2021 Housing Action Plan. I just want to say thank you to staff for preparing this report. Very thorough, and enjoyed reading it. So with that, I'd ask for a motion. Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Kunst, and Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I was a little concerned that we only had 35 responses on it out of a population of 130,000 people. So I'm wondering if we could receive this today and refer it for a presentation from staff.
So what you could do is make a motion to refer this to staff to come back with a presentation, because I think we've already got the motion on the floor to endorse it. So I think a referral motion, is that correct, Ms. Bauer? Would be a referral to staff to come back with a
Yes,
presentation?
referral would be
Okay.
appropriate.
So Councillor Richter, if you wish to make
Yes,
that.
I'd make that referral motion,
Okay.
please.
I'm just going to go to Councillor Arneson on the first motion first, to go through the speakers list and I'll come back to that, okay? Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, do you wish to speak to the?
Yes, thank you. I'm just waiting for the light. It's like sitting at the traffic stop. We've got to wait for the light. It's a great report. I want to thank staff for putting this together. I did have a bunch of questions about it, but I'm not sure now if there's an amending motion going forward to find a presentation opportunity. Perhaps that would be better than trying to have a back and forth today about it. I think it's a great plan, but I have some questions regarding the details, but they would likely be answered in an opportunity if there was a substantial presentation going forward. So, thank you.
Okay, so, Council Long, you came up after your hand came up. Did you want, because I think we're going to go to a referral, so rather than ask too many questions on the report, but if you have something quick, go ahead.
Well, I guess my comments will be mixed because I'm concerned about the referral because I'm happy to endorse it and have a presentation as well. But I guess what I'm hearing and clarification, Your Worship, is that we're not going to endorse it. We're going to refer it.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So maybe I will ask a question: is how does that affect any timelines or any work that's being undertaken? I mean, here's something that's been over a year. Or pretty much a year that we're working on it. I just hate to see it stalled.
Okay, so that's a question on the referral. So I'm going to get a seconder on the referral, and then Councillor Woodward seconds it. Mr. Seffi, can you please answer Councillor Long on timelines?
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, the situation is this: we do currently have an existing housing action plan that is fairly, I guess, dated. It's from 2013. The input, I would suggest that the way that Councillor Richter put it, as being not that many, may be a reflection of I think, the great work that has been undertaken by staff and stakeholders in making sure that there is adequate input and engagement throughout the process that has been certainly more than a year in the making. And the other point, I guess, Your Worship, even though there's no urgency on this, I think the certainty that Council's endorsement would provide the industry and staff in starting to develop policies around the housing action plan obviously would be assisting as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you mind further then, Your Worship, if that's
Sure.
okay?
A
Okay, so
follow-up,
I would be in favor of endorsing it and asking for a presentation, I guess, so that we can understand it a bit more, that the public can see it, because it'd likely be streamed and so forth. So I can see that as being a very positive thing to put it out there, but I would prefer to see us endorse it now and put it forward rather than hinging on this presentation.
Okay, right now the motion is for referral. I think Councillor Richter, if you wanted to amend it to endorse and refer for a presentation, we could do that, but if not, then we'll carry on with this. I'll go to Councillor Richter next.
Well,
Yeah.
put me down if
Yeah,
you want
no,
to, I can do
I'm
that.
not in favor of endorsing it because I do want to have the presentation. And one of the key questions that I had about the paper is what exactly is this plan going to lock the township in for or into going forward? And I think that that's why we need a presentation on it. And so I'm happy to, as I said earlier, receive it and refer it for the presentation. And once we have the presentation, then we can endorse it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis?
Yeah, my thoughts are after we receive a presentation, will we then take it to public input or not public input? Like, because there was, if you read the report, you read how many people, there wasn't that many people that reacted to it. Are we going to try to get more airtime, or not airtime, but are we going to try to get it out there so we can have better feedback? And then after the report, then we can change a couple things if we need be. That's what, I mean, I'm prepared to accept it, but I just wonder the intent of the mover. Is it, yeah, I guess the biggest thing is, what will we do after we get a report on it? Is it going to be able to be spread out so that we'll get more people looking at it, more publicity? I guess, no, that's the wrong word too. More input, I guess. People saying, yeah, it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. But we had that already, and that's the problem.
I think if this referral motion passes, then staff would come back and provide us with the details on the public engagement and what information they had, and council can always refer it back for more engagement if they feel it's necessary, but you'll get that clarity in the presentation. So
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, thank you. A couple of real quick questions. Very first question: have we not had a brief presentation already, or it was already in a past distribution list, or, if I may, other correspondent? That's the first small question, if I may, through the chair.
Mr. Sefi?
Your Worship, I don't recall if there was a presentation, but certainly the terms of reference that included the public engagement process were all presented to Council starting last year in 2020. Yeah, so there have been numerous, I guess, communications with Council, not a presentations in the formal sense of the word.
Okay, thank you. And now comes down to, I have seen this document a couple of times, maybe it's at committee stage or maybe it's been somewhere else. I've also discussed it with staff. I'm reading and discussing that during the feedback period, 347 individuals visited the project web stage. And I know that more than that saw it at committee or through other means. And from what I understand, there's been a really positive response. I mean, so perhaps it might be better just to accept it and just have another presentation, but to, which I guess the recommendation is to endorse it. And I think endorse it and then have it's always great to have an update on a presentation, but I have seen this doc, and plus I have talked to the planner about it as well, because I was very, very interested. So that's where I would think, Mr. Mayor, would make the most sense, if I may.
Okay.
Do you need a motion, an amendment to an amendment or not?
The amendment right now is to refer this motion that's on the table, which is to endorse, to, I guess, the next meeting for a presentation, and then the motion would come back to. So it's only, it's 3 weeks out. We get a presentation, and we could vote on it. So I know, either way, I think the mover wanted it to go this way. If this gets turned down, then perhaps another motion would be appropriate. So I'll call the question on the referral. All those in favor, referral for presentation, all and opposed? Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Long opposed, so that carries. Okay, so move on to number 4, Fort Langley Community Plan and Streetscapes Improvement Program. Councillor Woodward, you're okay with this one?
I'm okay with this.
Okay. So there's a motion to receive. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Kuntz, second with Councillor Whitmarsh on receipt. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. And we go to bylaws for first and second reading. First one, the only one, is official community plan amendment and rezoning application number 100198. And development permit application number 101124. This is 6834 204 Street, 20441 68th Avenue, bylaw 5734 and bylaw 5735. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh moves and seconder. Councillor Long, any discussion? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of this for 2 reasons. They're increasing the density from 20 to 22 units per acre. There are only 5 significant trees on this property as it stands right now, and none of them are going to be retained. I would rather retain some canopy coverage than add additional density. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I had similar concerns, and I'm wondering, through your Worship, to staff, I just want to comment on the voluntary contribution of CACs for the additional units. I think when looking at the staff report and seeing the layout, it was clear to me that for a relatively small amount of contribution, that there was going to be a substantial, relatively to the scope of the site, large increase, like a whole townhouse section worth of density there. So I'm wondering, as I said, through your Worship, to staff, is there any way to request a more substantive contribution in this regard? Because it seems to me that there's a huge financial upside and not a lot of contribution relative to, for example, putting some trees on a different site. I mean, I know that we're looking through TPAC and other opportunities. So this is my question. Is there any threshold that we currently know about that could be advanced to obtain more money for off-site contribution? Thank you.
Mr. Sefi.
Thank you, Your Worship. The contributions to community amenities, Your Worship, is consistent with the recently adopted council policy. In this particular case, this is supported because of a number of reasons beyond the financial contribution that is being made. It is obviously council's judgment as to whether the contributions are adequate or not. But as I said, the first thing I would say is that it's consistent with the recently adopted policy. It is consistent with past practice. This particular OCP amendment to increase the density to allow for 5 additional units is also being supported because of a number of reasons, as I said. Firstly, because it maintains the existing form of housing. It doesn't ask for, it doesn't trigger a different form of housing in terms of apartments or condominium units. The other point is that the public amenities include age-friendly considerations. The area is consistent with not just the requirements of the policy, but also the increase in the number of units is also being able to be accommodated on site, as well as parking is being accommodated on site. The other point, Your Worship, to keep in mind is that the area, the shape and size of these 2 parcels lend themselves to, in staff's opinion, a design that is not, I guess the analogy that's been made is the canyon effect, in that it's fairly wide open. It provides for air and light penetration. And finally, Your Worship, it is, in staff's opinion, consistent with the densities in the area. So with those reasons in mind, staff supports the application, Your Worship, with the contributions consistent with the policy, that being 3 times the CACs for the increase in the number of units, which is 5, which brings it to a total of $320,000 and change, as opposed to $230,000, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question on first and second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Arneson opposed, and
Opposed to, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richter opposed. It carries. Thank you. Move on to bylaws for first, second, and third reading. Number 1 is highway closure, dedication, removal, and disposal. The deal, bylaw number 5738. Councillor Davis moves it. Seconder. Councillor Woodward. Any discussion? Councillor Arneson.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I'm not in favor of this. I do have some recommendations, actually, and through you to staff, just a suggestion that, we have lands in our township inventory that from time to time we may wish to dispose of. However, I would like to see an opportunity before we actually do that as a council to see a tree inventory and potentially a biodiversity report, because we have lands here that we have no idea, at least I don't personally know, what exactly are the values of the lands. And for all I know, it could be 100-year-old trees that are on it. So I think that we need to be moving forward in a direction that's more progressive in this regard. I know we have some biodiversity plans, etc. And to me, to ask others for a tree survey when we don't ask ourselves for one when disposing of land, it seems incongruent to me that we would be doing that. So that would be my recommendation going forward when we dispose of lands, that especially rural lands, because rural lands in particular are the ones that generally have the largest amount of our tree volume canopy there. So that's just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I see no further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? G1. And opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Arneson and Councillor Richter opposed. Carries. Number 2 is the sanitary sewer local area service for 36A Avenue, 19900 block, bylaw 5751. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh moves it. Councillor Ferguson seconds it. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Councillor Arneson opposed. It carries. And we go to bylaws for consideration at third reading. And the one bylaw we have is rezoning application number 100556 and development permit application number 101053. This is flat architecture, bylaw 5619. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Long moves it. Councillor Kuhn seconds it. And Councilor Richter.
Yeah, 49 significant trees and they can only manage to retain 3. That's just not good enough. I'm not in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Councilor Arneson, Councilor Richter opposed. Carries. And we go to bylaws for final adoption. We have Drainage Development Works Agreement Bylaw, Mitchell-Williams Pond, DWA Incorporated, Bylaw 5624. Could I have a motion, please? Councilor Davis moves it. Seconder? And a second. Councilor Whitmarsh, discussion? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor?
I'm sorry, I can't figure out. I raised my hand.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
You want to speak to it? Okay, and you did move it. So go ahead, Councilor Davis.
Is it big enough? Is it going to be good enough for the next 20 years? This is the Mitchell-Williams Pond. Are we going to look at this in 20, 25 years? I mean, now they're starting to, even when you listen to the weather, they're starting to talk about these these river, I can't even pronounce what they're trying to say. Our rain events are getting worse and worse. I know that this is something that we normally do. This is exactly, we've got it engineered. I've seen the work that we've done underneath the 216th overpass to get rid of a lot of water that way. But boy, when we get an inch or two, it's very, very common that rainfalls are changing, drainage is going to change, and I just hope that we can hold it back. And I just want to be reassured by staff. I'm being a little cheeky here, but reassured by staff that this is going to take us so that there's no downfall on us in the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Mr. Seffi, can you comment on the pond?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to be a bit cheeky and say, well, it depends on our world leaders in Scotland right now, whether it's sufficient or not. But the fact of the matter is that it meets current design criteria. It meets best practices. It's been designed by engineers. And as I said, it meets the applicable municipal bylaws and requirements. And ultimately, we hope, nobody can guarantee, but it really depends on what happens in the next 20, 25 years, because it's not just a local issue. The amount of rainfall that we have is really dependent on what happens worldwide. So even though my comments earlier were a bit cheeky, it actually means that we can't guarantee, because it really depends on what happens in terms of removal of trees around the world.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's all we can do. I just always think of, on the TV, I see a swimming pool in the backyard, and there's 2 or 3 kids in it, and the big, fat, bald-headed guy like me tries to get in it, and all of a sudden, whoosh, boom, the pool empties. Things happen like that. I just hope we're going to be prepared for it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And stay out of the pond then, Councilor Davis.
Okay.
Councilor Arneson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have the same concerns as Councillor Davis. I'm not an engineer, and I don't doubt that there has been plenty of analysis and support for this particular pond, but as I noted last time, it is a grandfathered dimension that is currently being required of this proponent, and so I struggle with the fact that in the event that this was coming forward now, it would not meet our current requirements. Therefore, there is land as well as money that would accrue, I would say, to the proponent based on the fact that the engineering cost as well as the lands are going to be available for their whole proposal, as opposed to giving over more land to this detention pond. And I don't know, Mr. Safey, last time when I asked this question, I understand it's a more focused conversation about what is being done or planned for the eventuality that there is overage of precipitation that's coming down. Who is going to be responsible for that if this is too small? So I don't know if there's a condition that you could add, but I would hate to see a proposition of a totally, almost completely impervious area that's now going to have an undersized detention pond relative to our current standards. And that's just current. That's based on what we know today. So despite, the levity of somebody jumping into a pool, I don't find much, to be smirking about the fact that potentially others are going to be negatively impacted, including the township of Langley, who's going to have potential overland flooding as a result of this if the calculations are not correct. So I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Councillor Arneson opposed? It carries. Thank you. And correspondence, the Poppy, Remembrance Day Poppy campaign. It's a motion to receive. I know in the past we have granted the permission as a symbolic act of this council. So if somebody wanted to receive, make a motion to receive and also accept their request.
Receive and to.
Okay, so Councillor Whitmarsh moves, Councillor Long seconds. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And minutes of committees. We've got the Recreation, Culture, and Parks Advisory Committee of October 13th. We've got the Tree Protection Advisory Committee of October 19th. We've got the Seniors Advisory Committee of October 20th. And the Council Process Committee of October 25th. Could I have a motion for all of those? Councillor Arneson moves, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. And we have, now we have some motions under K. So Council Process Committee recommended motion that Council direct staff to look into our procedure bylaws, what's on the agenda, you can read it, to allow online participation. So could I have a mover for that?
K2, right?
K2, yeah. And it's moved. Council Long, second. Council Kunst, Council Long.
Yeah, we had quite a healthy discussion about it, and of course, this is asking staff to come back to us with the possibilities on how this is to be done. I notice there's a memo in today's distribution list. I haven't had a chance to try and correlate it with our proposed activities here, but I guess staff will be doing that too, because there's the memo about what can and can't be done, or if something changes to the community charter. So anyway, I think this is a great start, Your Worship, and we'll get information back from staff as to what we can actually accomplish with the technology that we have here in the chambers.
Great, thank you. All right, I see no further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It carries unanimously. Number 3 is, K3 is Council Process Committee recommended motion of having meetings November, December, and January for the Council Process Committee. Could I have a mover? Councillor Kunz, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Discussion. I'll call the question. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Arneson.
Got to be quicker than the mayor.
Gotta be fast.
Quick draw. My question is, through Your Worship, to staff, and I'm wondering what kind of process we've undertaken to consider how many people are currently available for these meetings. I would prefer if we had a full complement, but I didn't understand from this broadcast invitation whether or not who may or may not be available at this time for the meetings, if we know. Thank you.
Ms. Bauer, do you have any?
Past practice has been to go to the mayor to discuss the dates. The mayor did choose these dates. Council Process Committee, we generally don't check with council as we schedule them on the Mondays.
Okay, thank you. Call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Councillor Arneson's opposed. Carries. The mayor's report, mayor and council report. Let's see. So good afternoon, everyone, in Zoom land and here. On October the 19th, Foundry Langley announced their $2.1 million campaign to build Foundry Langley, as the Langley Hospital Foundation actually announced their campaign. A 7,600 square foot space equipped with services to meet the urgent health and wellness needs of Langley youth. There it is. Thanks to the Langley Memorial Hospital Foundation and our generous residents. They're already 55% towards their goal. So this is something that much needed in our community, and certainly looking forward to it. Also, on October the 19th, Friday Gourmet Foods presented a check for $70,000, announced that they are sponsoring the gardens and outdoor learning spaces at Salishan Place by the river. We thank Friday for the generous sponsorship, and we're excited to see the gardens in the spring of 2023. And that's our new museum in Fort Langley, so thank you, Friday. The annual Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce Business Excellence Awards took place on October the 21st. I'd like to congratulate all the outstanding nominees and the winners. Recipients this year include Country Lumber Limited, Large Business of the Year, Backyard Vineyards Medium Business of the Year, Blue Moon Plumbing and Heating Limited Small Business of the Year. They should have got an award for a great name. Signal Hill Community Impact for Nonprofits. Kraus Berry Farms and Estate Winery is Employer of the Year, and Jack Nicholson of the Auto Co-op was awarded the George Preston Memorial Business Person of the Year. So congratulations to all of the recipients, and it's always great to know we have such a good group of businesses in our community and nonprofits. I, along with members of council, attended the Metro Vancouver Council of Councils meeting on October the 23rd. Topics of discussion included the 2022 to 2026 financial plan and updates on liquid waste, water, and solid waste services. And then later on, report on October 29th, Metro Vancouver had their board meeting and the budget was passed. On October 28th, Council Long and I attended the Zero Waste Conference, the National Zero Waste Conference, which happens every year in end of October, beginning of November. Metro Vancouver is committed to accelerating the transition to a circular and zero waste economy and creating solutions that combine economic opportunity with benefits to wider society and the environment. During the conference, we explored the ideas and actions with the greatest potential to transform our communities and economies in support of a future without waste. I must say the speakers were phenomenal, world class, and I always say there's one wow moment for me, and or who knew? And there's a company in Mexico that are making a product that looks like leather from cactus, and so these cactus are grown on lands that can't grow anything else, and providing opportunities to farmers, and really helping our environment by growing clothing or used for car seats and everything else from cactus. So that was pretty cool. The official pinning of the first poppy of the season took place on Friday, October the 29th, with the Aldergrove Legion President Doug Hadley. Remembrance Day is next week on November the 11th, with some local ceremonies being held virtually and others in person. We encourage all of you to watch or attend and think about the brave men and women who gave so much for our country, our freedom, and our way of life. So there will be, I think, virtually and I guess limited, there's limited amount of people that are at the Murrayville Cemetery, the Fort Langley Cemetery, and the Aldergrove Legion. So with that completes my mayor's report. I'll ask Councillor Richter has her hand up if she has something to add. Councillor Richter?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just wanted to say that the 3.5% tax increase was approved by the board. But the big thing that happened on the board meeting on Friday was it was the longest board meeting I've been at. 7.5 hours long, 35 delegations. And I'm very disappointed to have to report to council that a majority of people on the board approve Surrey's motion to move forward with mixed commercial development on the lands bordering the township of Langley and over the Berkswood Aquifer, 660 acres. I want to flag for council's attention that the process that will now go through is that Metro will be notifying the member municipalities of this decision and asking for input. I think there's three key things that we need to address when it's our turn to give feedback on it. Number one is the protection of the Berkswood Aquifer. As council is well aware, we still use blended water and we will be continuing to use blended water in this area as well. And a large part of the recharge lands that are used to recharge the Berkswood area will end up being industrial commercial sprawl going forward. So we need to look after protecting our aquifer and to ensure that that aquifer is protected in whatever it is that Surrey moves forward with. The second thing is, I think because they're putting, again, this sprawl, this industrial commercial sprawl right next door to our residential areas, we need to ensure that there is a substantive buffer, treed buffer preferred, between the township of Langley and the city of Surrey going forward. And the third thing is to address the issues around what will be substantively increased truck traffic on 16th Avenue. So those are the three areas of concern that I feel will impact the township. There may be others, but we need to be very cognizant of those impacts and prepared to speak up about protecting our township going forward. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it was the longest Metro meeting I've been involved in, and I think that issue took 5 hours. And the vote was 82 to 52, so certainly lots of good discussion and presentations
Yeah,
on both.
It was 82 to 52.
Yeah.
You're right,
Yeah,
Mr.
on the
Mayor.
weighted
But
vote, yeah.
in bodies, it was 22 to 18.
Yeah, but on the weight,
The
yeah,
bodies
that's right.
carried. So Vancouver, Burnaby, the areas that don't know what we have out here in the Little Campbell River and that watershed and that aquifer did not support protecting it. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't want to get in a debate on the whole thing. I think Langley was split. I was in favor and you're against, but that's democracy. And certainly there's lots of work going forward that'll have to happen. But definitely was one of the longest meetings, and that I think we spent 5 hours on that one issue, and certainly was a good debate and good information from all the delegates, no matter what they supported. So I thought it was quite interesting. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I've learned thank you, Mr. Mayor, I've learned over a number of years that democracy is an interesting thing. I only sat in on the meeting for about 3.5 hours, so I really didn't have a real total understanding of all the 7.5 hours of debate. But what I did notice, and regardless of the good points that Councillor Richter has made regarding the environment, regarding the size of the expansion, and something dear to my heart is I'll try to use careful words, the lack of consultation with some of the Indigenous relations folk in the area, and I'm talking about the Semiahmoo First Nation, who spoke as a delegation, both Chief Harley Chappelle, who appeared as a delegation more than one time on Friday, the October 29th. I really, really believe that it's not just business as usual in our normal, the word democracy, I think, was used in the word democracy. Under the United Nations Indigenous Relations, there is a charter that has now been accepted by many countries. Canada accepted it as well. Canada did not accept it originally. Canada went through a long process of determining what would be the best vehicle to proceed with that declaration. A lot of you folks might remember that there was a United Nations Declaration of Rights and Freedoms a number of years ago, and people might remember Bruce Springsteen's song about the chimes of freedom. I'll look that up if you're ever looking for something to listen to. And also, I believe that it's important to listen to Indigenous relations, and that goes on to both the federal government of Canada, provincial government, and I think regional government is working really, really hard. But I was very disappointed with the way that was handled, and hopefully they'll be able to listen to other communities that have the same concern as I might have, that there is a change in the way we do things. I also, my last thing, Mr. Mayor, I am kind of perplexed. How can my neighbor build a house? I'm talking about a neighbor in Langley, not Surrey. And I would step down because I'm in conflict of interest. And yet Surrey, this amendment is on their property, and yet they can vote on it. How does that work? Help me out.
That's the way it works.
I mean, there's no such thing as a conflict of interest in
I'm not going to
Metro Vancouver?
I'm not going to comment on Metro Vancouver's
It just doesn't make
process.
sense. I've been contemplating that, and I've asked other people. It just doesn't, because if my neighbor is building a house, I step down because I'm in conflict of interest.
Okay.
Anyway, that's just the way I look at it. Thank you.
There have been numerous OCP amendments like that, and I have never to this day seen any municipality step down on a conflict. I don't think it's ever been challenged. So I don't see why Surrey would at this point. It's never happened before. And same thing with Township of Langley. We've been involved with similar motions, and we've been in there for those motions. Councilor Whitmarsh.
Leave the building when Langley
No, that-
Township came up. We
no,
were in
that was-
conflict of interest.
No, that was a legal
It's
issue.
still conflict.
That's right, but that was a legal issue, so there's two
Yeah,
different
but
things.
it's
Okay,
illegal or
Councillor-
otherwise.
Councillor
It's all
Ferguson.
debatable, that's all.
No, it's not debatable. It is very
Well, I
different.
think it is.
Yeah, you're entitled to your opinion. Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Your worship, I just had a question with regards to this topic, and Councillor Richter mentioned opportunity for us to have further input into this, and I'm just wondering either through yourself, your worship, through staff, or maybe even Councillor Richter, just if we know what the timing might be of opportunity to provide that input and what the format might be, if there's any indications on that going forward. Thank you.
Maybe Mr. Seffi can respond to the process moving forward.
Your worship, I believe it's 60 days, a referral process. What I'm struggling with is when that 60-day gets triggered. So we will have some time. There will be adequate time for the Township of Langley to put its decision, council's decision, on the record formally. Despite how the board directors may have voted, council will have an opportunity as a whole to put its opinion forward to Metro Vancouver, and we can provide council with a memorandum with outlining the next steps as quickly as possible.
Okay, that would be very helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see anything else on that, so. Oh, okay, yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. And teaching moment again is that the Metro Vancouver is now continuing with their education series, Dairy and Grease to Green Bin, just a reminder, Dairy and Grease to Green Bin. And a reminder of only pee and poo get flushed down the toilet. That's important to remember all the time. No dish rags, other things clog up the pipes and cost money. And the final thing they're really concerned about at liquid waste management is rainwater getting in the sewer. That's not a good thing. It's hard on the system. It's hard on fish. So they're working on an introduction of better drainage throughout the region of those heavy rain days in which we get those big storms. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, see nothing further, so I'll move forward to items from prior meetings. And N1, Draft Metro 2050 Regional Growth Strategy Update. So, Ms. Bauer, where was this one left? I know it got referred. Do I need a motion again, or is it on the floor? If you just advise me. It was referred or deferred. It was deferred.
It was deferred, sir, so we don't need a motion. It's live.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will start the list then. All anew. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, well, given that disappointing decision that was made on Friday by the board, and also the application is moving forward under the 2040 standards, not the 2050 standards, I would like to ask staff if we are confident that the feedback that we are sending on 2050 includes very strongly worded comment around the protection of our aquifers going forward, particularly the Berkswood aquifer.
Mr. Seffi.
Your worship, the process is similar to, I guess, what's been described previously, in that there will be an opportunity for council to provide additional comments to Metro Vancouver. This time around is a bit more informal, if you will. Having said that, staff believes that there is adequate language in the existing 2040 plan that will be then translated or conveyed, carried forward, if you will, into the 2050 plan.
Okay, and our comments that we're going to be sending do reference protection of the aquifers then?
Your worship, these are the 5 sets of comments that staff is presenting to council as part of this report do not refer to protection of aquifer in that there's been no change or no proposed amendments to the 2040 plan. So there's no need, unless council deems it to be otherwise, to include additional language.
then that's what I'm suggesting. Maybe we need to add a comment in about protecting recharge areas for the aquifer.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis?
Thank you very much. On page of the report, on page 67, they talk about protection, enhancement, restore, and connection, the ecosystems. And if you read down on A, increase the area of lands protected for nature from 40 to 50% of the region's land base by the year 2050. And then of course B, increase the total tree canopy cover within the urban containment boundary from 32 to 40 by the year 2050. Today I drove up 80th and there was a big, huge buck right in the middle of where we're putting a 30-acre, I mean, I guess I'm being cheeky again, but right in the middle of a 30-acre building, so to speak. And I know I'm not trying to egg anybody on about trees, wink, wink, but we are tearing down 30 acres of trees, an awful lot of trees, and today I saw a big, huge buck there. Where there's a big buck walking, you know there's other deer to mingle. So I just wonder, where Metro Vancouver is trying to, you know, say we're going to save nature, and then the townships are tearing it down. It's kind of like, it's a good thing, but it's kind of like, you know, fog and mirrors kind of, and that does concern me. I know that we're going ahead with that, but I saw it today. You know, we keep tearing down trees and ecosystems. Okay, the other question, that's maybe more of a comment, but it is something that concerns me. Page 115. Again, I'm going to bring this up. Councillor Long, I'm not trying to egg you on here either. But Aldergrove in this picture by the year 2050 is going to, I think they want it to be squared. And I'm concerned about the language, because then I go to page 129, and in page 129 they have the Fort Langley Airport and the University District, and it's circled. And I know that down, if you look down number 2, it actually has the map of the lands that is shown there. But I'm just, and then they start using language like, there are 2 locations where the regional land use designations show on Metro Vancouver 2050 maps are not consistent with the land use designation. I'm just worried about that non-consistent word, because we've had that before, and is you know, I think I'd like to vote for this, but I just hope that it's just not a big fuzzy document that sounds really good for the next 50 years when we're not going to keep at it and do some of the things that are in here, like increase ecosystems by 40 to 50%. Like how are we going to do that if we keep tearing down in the township? If we keep, you know, we know that the ALR lands are some, you know, we can, as a farmer, we can tear them down and clean them and farm them, and legitimate farmers do that, and that's maybe not a problem, but I'm just concerned about that. Like I think I want to vote for this, but I am concerned that on maybe those maybe a comment on the non-consistency, because I know I've heard that in the last 6, 7, 8 years. I've heard that word many times about the designations.
Mr. Seffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we already have a regional growth strategy, Your Worship. It's called Metro Vancouver 2040. What Metro Vancouver folks are doing is amending that 2040 plan, this is their words, to extend the life by an additional 10 years, to comply with provincial legislation, and to incorporate language that is more in keeping with the current thinking around climate change and climate adaptation. This is the intent. So they're not making holistic changes to the 2040 plan. I believe the areas that Councillor Davis is referring to are matters that are already within the existing RGS. And as such, staff, at least, council can decide on whatever council believes to be appropriate. But from staff's perspective, what we are highlighting for council are the areas that the 2050 plan is not consistent with our OCP, which is consistent with the 2040 plan. So as an example, the area around Aldergrove, there's no inconsistency with the 2050 plan because it is exactly the same as what we show in our OCP, which is exactly how the 2040 plan shows it. The airport and Trinity Western University or the University District areas, the inconsistencies there are because of the changes that they're proposing as part of their 2050 plan that is inconsistent with their 2040 plan.
Okay, but they are changing it because on page 67 they say they're going to pardon me, increase it from 40 to 50%. And in B on page 167 they're going to try to increase the tree canopy from 32% to 40%. So they are changing it from 2040 to 2050. Anyhow, I guess they've asked if the motion reads that they'd like our comments, and yeah, that's I just things that sprung out at me. Thanks for your words.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Also thankful to staff for putting this together. I know it's part of the expectation as being part of Metro that we have to be responsive to their plans. As somebody who sits on the Climate Action Committee, I certainly know that more and more we are requiring ourselves to be in a position of being iterative, which means that if we don't know exactly where we're going to end up, then what we need to do is to be more sensitive to the response that's necessary to advance a positive outcome based on the uncertainty. So I clearly see that obviously both sides need to have some flexibility. My concerns in reading this report are primarily founded in attachment B. So to me, it is fairly clear, and this is just my view, that we are somewhat, and Councillor Davis has used different words, but I feel that we are somewhat on a collision course with Metro in terms of their expectations about what the township is going to deliver. And the way that they hold up their regulatory and infrastructure processes is somewhat concerning to me when I see things like at policy 691, the sewerage extension area. I think I can speak fairly confidently that the township's position would be historical planning and expectations would likely be that the areas that we have designated for growth are going to be serviced by this sewerage infrastructure. Same thing would be true with respect to, there's two references here that I think are problematic. The 2040 and 2050, the reference to the North Salmon uplands and South Fern Ridge in Metro 2040. So I would really like to have a more substantive response from staff to council to explain in more detail about what that would look like. And then finally, I guess the regional land use designations. I find that the Fort Langley Airport and University District, both being designated by Metro Vancouver for 2050 as agricultural, I would like a more detailed explanation as to what that looks like and the potential challenges that would be for the township. And then finally, making Aldergrove, we want to make sure that the municipal town center is considered as part of the major transit network. So I know those are fairly comprehensive questions, but I personally don't feel comfortable in endorsing these without understanding and not to get into staff business and administration, but to look at it from a governance model and say, what is the expectation that we're going to be able to meet the 2050 roadmaps and guidelines? And failing that, then what is our alternative? Is this like a longer-term negotiation with Metro to figure out how we can balance our needs and requirements with their expectations? Thank you.
Thank you. So did you want staff to comment on that now? Yeah, Mr. Seffi, if you captured all of that. I'll let you take a stab at it.
Your Worship, I believe Councillor Arneson's asking for a presentation, which staff would be pleased to provide. Again, I don't know if I'm not making myself clear. I apologize for that. Metro Vancouver staff did provide a presentation to the council within the past, I think, couple of months, and advised council of their plan to proceed with the Metro 2050 process. Now, this process, in their view, should not deal with matters that they call are substantive, but rather matters that are more, I guess, superficial in terms of not changing holistically the strategies outlined in 2040, because Metro Vancouver believes those fundamental principles remain unchanged. So what staff is doing is responding to the changes that Metro Vancouver is presenting now, not those matters that are holistically put in fundamentally as part of the 2040 plan, but rather the changes that they're proposing as part of the 2050 plan. I think, if I'm not mistaken, what I'm hearing from Councillor Davis and Councillor Arneson so far, they relate to matters that are already part of the 2040 plan. Again, there's nothing wrong with us making those issues and asking Metro Vancouver to address those, but these are not matters that at a staff level we were asked to provide input on, but rather matters that they propose to change as part of their update, their minor update. This is not a major update, if I can call it that, but rather a minor update that they wish to amend certain aspects of the plan, not fundamental principles of the plan. So that's the comment I would provide. In terms of, as an example, Councillor Arneson references policy 6.9.1. There are maybe not hundreds, but certainly dozens of policy provisions in the plan. Now, this is one that affects the Township of Langley specifically. Why? Because we are one of the few municipalities, if not the only one, that had an area prior to the introduction of the RGS. Remember, the RGS was a far leap, if you will, from the previous strategic plan, the regional strategic plan, which didn't have the strong teeth that the current RGS does. So previously, we had the green zone. We had a separate layer, which was the sewage catchment area plan. Even though we had the green zone, it was really the sewage catchment area that determined what areas could be developed and what areas could not be developed. Portions of the Township of Langley around Salmon River Uplands were included as part of the sewage catchment area analysis, which then by extrapolation goes into the determination of the sizes of treatment plants. Metro Vancouver then, as part of the RGS, wanted to remove those areas from the catchment area. And we said no, because of the historic nature of that provision, because the Township of Langley has contributed towards regional infrastructure such as treatment plants. We want to be sure that the areas that were historically part of the catchment remain part of the catchment. So that language was then enshrined after significant negotiations with Metro Vancouver in prior to the 2040 plan in 2009, 2010, and 2011. We managed to agree on the language that is currently in the 2040 plan. Now, what they're doing is, fast forward, they're saying, well, that language is not quite clear. They would like to make amendments, and we're thinking, well, let's take a look at the proposed language. There's nothing wrong, in our view, with the language, because, first of all, it only affects the Township of Langley. Secondly, typically, when you want to make a change, it's because something's triggered that change. We have not heard of or have been made aware of any issues that have come about as a result of this provision. So we are questioning the language that they're proposing because we believe that it might create more confusion. So that is the reasoning why we have 5 areas and not more, because of the fact that this is not a fundamental major review of the existing RGS, but rather a minor update to bring it, again, more in line with climate action objectives.
Sure, we'll get your mic. I'll just get
Yeah,
your mic.
thank
There
you.
Go ahead.
I appreciate that, and I recognize that this is a process that's challenging on both sides. But what I would say is, for me, since we are now in a completely unprecedented era, whatever plans we made from 2040, 2050, and beyond that are really subject to the conditions, the scientific conditions that we find ourselves in. So I just want to impress upon everyone, including myself, that when this decision-making goes forward, that we need to have some latitude. And I guess I struggle with these historic expectations. And, you know, to refer to things as a minor or housekeeping amendment, that's the same thing that happened in South Campbell Heights. It's a minor adjustment. Well, I don't agree with that logic either, but that results in certain things happening. So the way this is written currently, I cannot support it, because I feel that there has to be either a reconsideration of Langley Township's unique role in Metro and some kind of consideration for that that's outside of the context of just a generic document like this, or else I think Metro Vancouver is going to increasingly impinge upon what our plans are. That's my concern. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and if I just reiterate one thing, just I don't know if this helps or not, but under provincial legislation, this plan has to be renewed every 10 years. So, and as I think Mr. Sefi had stated, there are some updates to it due on basically on what Councillor Arneson's talking about. Things are changing, and so that's part of the update. But it's an update to the existing plan. And 10 years from now, we'll be doing this all over again. So it's legislatively required, and that's why it's in front of us. But I think it's good that it's at least every 10 years that we get another look at it. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just when you're ready to take it, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that amendment that I mailed to Council earlier today.
Oh, okay, I haven't seen it yet, but I'll come back to you.
So I'll move that. It's an amendment to the comments that was sent out. I will move that when the time comes.
Okay, I'll go through the speakers list and come back to you. Okay, just circle that. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following up on comments made both by Councillor Davis and Councillor Arneson, and just a question through maybe to Mr. Sefi through Your Worship. On that, just to get a specific answer around Attachment B and the regional land use designations, I appreciate that maybe in the 2040 document it also from Metro lists those two areas, the Fort Langley Airport and University District, as being agricultural. But our RCS designation is different. Can you just specifically indicate if that's something that we should be concerned about, or is a concern that the designation that we have for those lands is different than what Metro, whether that's in 2040 or 2050?
Your Worship, thank you for the opportunity. The documents we're discussing, Your Worship, are fairly technical in all aspects. As I referenced earlier, there are many policy provisions that came together after a long process of discussions, because inevitably when you have a number of municipalities trying to agree on a set of documents that is good for the region, you end up with a situation where there's a clash of opinions. And that was certainly the case way back, as I said, 10, 12 years ago, when the current 2040 plan was ultimately adopted. As such, this process to update also took on a bit of a technical path, if you will, with staff discussing what is now in front of Council at a staff level with Metro Vancouver staff. So the areas that Councillor Whitmarsh just referenced, I believe, is amongst those areas that Metro Vancouver staff, at least at a staff level, have agreed that the changes are needed to make sure that there's consistency between the 2040 and 2050 plan, and that those are in fact errors or oversights or I guess incursions, if you will, on areas that were not contemplated previously. So there's no disagreement, at least in the area of the mapping errors, if I can call it that, as far as the staff is concerned, Your Worship. And then I guess, Your Worship, inherent with such a plan then, because the issue that's fresh in Council's memory, Council's mind, that was referenced by Council Richter, came about. I think what's important to note is that because of the varied and diverse nature of our region, and because of the fact that this document is trying to deal with the needs of each one of the member municipalities, whilst keeping, I guess, some fundamental principles in mind, there needs to be a process of amendment. I think everybody would agree that any document, regardless of its high or detailed nature, high level or detailed nature of its existence, its structure, needs to have a process for it to be amended based on a certain, I guess, structure of certain rules. And as long as those rules are followed, then I don't think the process can be, I guess, criticized, because the process is being followed. So regardless of what is requested to be inserted, there needs to be a process for that provision to be amended. And as long as the region follows that process properly, then I guess amendments should be allowed, because I think that's part of a growing region and part of the dynamics of having a regional plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Is that me or Councillor Richter?
Councillor Ferguson.
Okay, because I see her.
She's,
sometimes we
she's,
follow the screen. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's a second time speaker. So that's
Okay,
next.
very good. I did hear a comment from Councillor Arneson. She said we might be in a collision course with Metro Vancouver. I don't think we're quite that far. I think we have some challenges, both historical and otherwise, with Metro Vancouver. They do an awful lot of good things to provide a service for sewer, water, parks, and other things. We have, unfortunately, been affordable to challenges, both historical and otherwise, transit, the hard work the mayor and council staff did on court case regarding regional growth strategy and the regional growth plan and handshake deals and things like that. And things change over the years. So also now with the idea of one sewerage area, which is a challenge for the township of Langley and people in Fraser District as well. So I think that there's a way we need to work forward and work with Metro Vancouver to let them know our concerns early on, whether they're able to implement them or not, but let them know, because I think things change over here, and you're gonna hear this more and more. You heard earlier on about the fact that things are going to change, and believe it or not, Metro Vancouver and member municipalities within that Metro Vancouver Regional District are going to be facing new challenges and new changes. But I think we should give the word was an exhaustive list to Metro Vancouver, and as Mr. Safey has already indicated, it's a higher level or very technical. Regardless of that, we have to make sure that we can get our voice heard in a very large district that we have only a few votes in. So that's my point, and I know that there's some amendments coming forward as well, so I'll wait and see what they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long. Or Councillor Woodward, you're still waiting for your amendments, right? Okay, Councillor Long.
Well, I'm not sure what amendments we're discussing.
We're on the main motion right now.
Yeah, so I have a concern about the process. I mean, this all started on September 20th. A month later, we got a report on October 18th. Some on council felt they needed a few more hours, time of some kind to review the presentation, although we received it on September 20th, so we could have probably put, comments in sooner to staff, almost immediately after the 20th, I would think, or questions could have been asked on the 20th. But we didn't, so instead on October 18th, we deferred it to this meeting.
Maybe you can speak to the motion.
Yeah, I am speaking to the motion. So I think we need to approve this thing and move forward, but now we are putting a bunch of other things on the table, it appears, and there's discussion about an amendment, which I don't even have. So I just heard that Mr. Safey had mentioned perhaps a presentation would be in order, but I mean, we are sure getting tight to the deadline. We're supposed to have something in by the 26th. I suppose it's not the end of the world if we could ask for a few days later because we mucked up somewhere. But should we be getting a presentation then and then consider whatever amendments the Councilor Ferguson's referring to, which I don't even know exist? I know with Council Richter talked about addressing the aquifer, and that maybe that staff could comment on that. There's been some discussion and clarification asked for by members of council in terms of the other areas that staff have pointed out in the memo. So, Your Worship, I'd like us to move forward on this, and maybe you can help us by suggesting what route that would be, considering the deadline is the 26th of November, and the deadline to submit things to council, is that not the Wednesday prior to the meeting? So why are we having an amendment that I haven't seen yet being discussed at this table?
Okay, so when we get to the amendment, then we'll discuss the amendment. But at this point, so just to be clear, this is a process that, as I said, is legislated. Metro Vancouver's gone through a long, extensive process to get it to this point, to go over every section that you see in that document. The committees have looked at it, it's come to the board has looked at it, and now it's at the point where it goes out to municipalities for comments, and there's a process involved that that's why we're here right now, to provide those comments to Metro Vancouver. And as Mr. Seffi said, this is really the 2040 plan. I think was working quite well, I suppose, but there are always changes, and that's what the updates, and that's what this is for. But this is our time to have that, and and there's the report in front of you. But we'll go through the speakers list and come back, and we can entertain any amendments that
Sure.
any member of council can
Well,
make. At any
keep
time.
in mind then, Your Worship, I might suggest that whatever amendments council members have, they could submit them to staff by tomorrow or something and get a presentation and a report again at the next meeting so we can finally pass this thing.
So following up on that, Mr. Seffi, if you can just provide some clarity. So at this point, if council were satisfied with the staff report and the 5 amendments, or the 5 pieces of information to go to Metro Vancouver, does that prohibit us from coming back with further information by the next meeting to also add to it? Or once this is done, are we done? But I would think we'd have the opportunity to add further comments, but maybe you can clarify that. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the process that Metro Vancouver's embarked upon, Your Worship, is requesting member municipalities to provide feedback on the draft. This is in addition to the legal requirements of adoption of a new Metro Vancouver regional growth strategy. So what I mean by that is they've requested at this point that comments be provided through a council resolution, in addition to the staff feedback, through a council resolution prior to November 26th. Then what will happen is Metro Vancouver will determine what comments they feel is, I guess, worthy, if you will, of being incorporated, or worthy of further discussion at the board level, or simply ignored. And then at some point, currently they target March of 2022. At some point, they will give a new bylaw, because this Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy has to be adopted by the Metro Vancouver Board as part of a bylaw adoption process, which includes a public hearing and then subsequently referral to member municipalities formally for input and feedback. And Metro Vancouver will then be able to adopt it finally only if all member municipalities actually accept the RGS. If there's any conflicts, any issues, it must be resolved before Metro Vancouver can adopt it. So that's the process, Your Worship. I hope it answers your question.
Oh, thank you. That's good clarity. Councillor Kunst.
So this would be for just my education through Your Worship to staff. When I was thinking about what Councillor Richter said about Campbell Heights and the traffic that is going to be coming from that, and I'm also aware that Roberts Bank Terminal 2 is just underway and not complete, and the kind of traffic that's going to come from those two things, South Langley, 16th Avenue, it's basically a highway in going through ALR land. Does the regional growth strategy, when I look at the strategy 1.2.2, it talks about working with member jurisdictions, TransLink, other governments and agencies to support the development and delivery of effective regional transportation networks, and it goes on from there. How does that issue get discussed or through does that happen through the regional growth strategy, or where do we take that? I guess that would be my question.
Sevi?
Thank you, Worship. The Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy, Your Worship, has different layers. Again, having worked on the first one, the Metro 2040, I know that there is significant discussion that goes on as far as what specific aspect of a policy provision should be a requirement that is regulated as part of the RGS, or rather simply stated as a vision and left up to the judgment discretion of a member municipality to follow through with. So those are matters that are currently in the Metro 2040. And again, some have additional language that requires certain aspects, and some do not. Having seen the communication from Councillor Woodward that was sent to Council earlier today, I note as an example the designation map and the wording that goes around the various uses that are contemplated in the RGS. Those are subject to, I guess, the strictest level of interpretation. In other words, if it's not provided for, if a certain land use is not provided for in the RGS, then it has to go through a process, which is similar to what happened, well, not similar, it's exactly what happened in the case of the Campbell Heights neighborhood and what the city of Surrey did, as referenced by Councillor Richter earlier on. So the other aspects, the one that Councillor Kuntz just referenced, those are just simply, I guess, more visionary statements that are not subject to the strict regulation by Metro Vancouver, but rather put in such that it is used as a lens as member municipalities review applications or consider their long-term plans and objectives.
Okay, does that help? Okay,
Sure,
thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to propose an amendment, and I've sent the amendment to the clerk as well as to members of council, but I'll read it here.
Okay, just
The
if you
council-
could just hold on half a second. Councillor Woodward had amendments first, so I wanted to respect his request to go first. Do you mind holding your amendment till we deal with Councillor Woodward's?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long, your hand is up. Is that for a second time to speak? Okay, it's down. Okay, so I'll go to, okay, so I want to start a new page here. I want to go to Councillor Woodward. You had an amendment you wish to make, and I haven't seen it, so if you give us a moment to check.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Mayor. So I've moved that amendment to add comment 6 as emailed to council earlier today, and I've also emailed that to the clerk so she could read that for us.
Okay, I'm just going to get up my email and take a look at it. Woodward.
So I'll move that.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Whitmarsh seconds. Yeah, so I just want to read it.
A point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes?
What are we voting on? Because I don't have a
Yeah.
copy of it.
Okay, so we'll just slow this down a half a nanosecond and take a look at it. So there's, I'm looking for the email. Okay, so there's one here. So Councillor Wood, if you could, I think I have the one in front of us, in front of me. Could you read your amendment, please? So it's
Quite long. You want me to
yeah,
read
if
the
you
whole-
could read it, it'd be
read
great.
the whole thing?
And then it's in the record.
Okay. So I'm just going to confirm, I did make a mistake, and I sent it to the wrong address for Councillor Richter. That's why she doesn't have it, so I did make a mistake there.
Okay.
The items here is item number 1, portions of the Williams Neighborhood Plan area located at the northeast corner of 216th Street and 80th Avenue are not designated as business park, but rather various forms of commercial, the subject lands. The existing Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy of 2040 designates both of these areas referenced in one above, designated business park and various commercial in the Williams Neighborhood Plan as mixed employment with no distinction. Number 3, the areas designated as various forms of commercial in the Williams Neighborhood Plan are considered suitable for more intensive forms of mixed-use development, including residential uses, given their prominent location, unique geographic context, and close proximity to employment-generating lands, institutional uses, and a major transportation corridor. Accordingly, the mixed employment designation of the subject lands is not supported, as it does not provide for potential residential uses. Therefore, as part of an improved mixed-use development to better respond to the identified regional objectives of climate action, housing supply, walkability, residential proximity to employment, and housing affordability via additional supply, the designation of the subject lands shall be amended to include residential uses as part of the mixed-use developments.
Okay, thank you.
I'll speak to that a bit if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, if you want to speak to it, then I have some, then it's, yeah, so.
Questions can
that's-
go
yeah, I
first,
just-
that's fine.
Yeah, I just want to make sure Council Richter has received it and has had a look at it.
Yeah, I apologize for that
Yeah,
mistake.
that's okay. Council Richter?
I still don't have a copy of it,
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
so,
Just emailing it to
yeah, it's
Councilor
just
Richter.
being emailed to you, so we'll give it a minute. There's some time on this. And Council Richter wishes
Apologize
to.
for that mistake. Yeah.
No, that's okay. So maybe, I have a question, but of staff regarding the process, but if you want to, I don't want to interfere with your wanting to speak first to it. It's your
I'm
motion.
happy to go through questions first, because maybe that would be helpful rather than.
Okay. Mr. Seffi, just to help clarify this. So, as I understand it, the Township of Langley submitted a regional context statement to Metro Vancouver to be incorporated into the regional growth strategy. And that regional context statement reflects our main official community plan, which then drills down and reflects the other plans that the Township of Langley Council over a period of time have put through. So this referral motion, it seems to me it's more towards the amendment to either the neighborhood plan or the official community plan for that area, or even the official community plan, the Township of Langley, which then is the basis for our regional context statement, which then goes to Metro Vancouver. Can you maybe clarify? I'm just not sure if this fits into this at this point, or if it's something that would be better handled in another manner. So,
Your Worship, that would be a decision of Council and ultimately Metro Vancouver. As township staff understand it, it wasn't the intent of Metro Vancouver staff to undertake comprehensive amendments, but rather, again, keep up with the legislation, make sure that the provisions contained in the 2040 plan are extended by another 10 years, and then at the same time, incorporate as much language as possible to ensure the interests of the region in terms of climate action and resilient development of communities is further encouraged, enshrined in the 2050 plan. That said, it is really up to Council to determine what level of input Council wishes to put forward. Ultimately, whatever the amendments consist of or include, it will trigger an amendment to our regional context statement. So whether it includes the amendment put forward by Councillor Woodward or not, ultimately, assuming that the RGS gets adopted, the new 2050 gets adopted, that will then trigger an amendment to our RCS. So it would just mean that it will have to capture more discussion as part of our OCP amendment, which is where the home of the RCS is.
okay, so a motion like this would trigger, as I understand it, an amendment to our regional context statement, but prior to that, it'd be an amendment to our official community plan, which would then trigger as a public process with public hearing and a bylaw process prior to this going through. So I'm just wondering if this is appropriate to put it through as an amendment now, or does this trigger a whole process? And if it's appropriate to go through, I'm fine with that. I'm just trying to get clarity here.
So, Your Worship,
Yeah.
sorry, just to clarify, I apologize again if I'm not making myself clear. So there's no change to our process. So the process currently and proposed would require the Township of Langley to amend its OCP. And as part of that, the RCS to more align itself with the new RGS. Whether it includes more substantive amendments or not, that would remain a consistent and constant common denominator in both approaches.
Okay, so so that would trigger a public process that would include public hearing, because this affects property. This affects a designation of property that's already been previously approved by council. So to do this amendment does not now trigger an OCP amendment, which will then go through a full process of a bylaw change and public hearing. Like
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
so with this amendment coming onto, so by council endorsing this amendment to this report, it can't just disappear into vapor. It has to then come back to us in the form of a bylaw or an OCP change. I'm just trying to see how can we send this to Metro Vancouver without us going through a proper process is what I'm trying to establish. I don't know if Mr. Backen can help with that, because I see there's separate processes here.
Your worship, I think from staff's perspective, it could be either way. That goes back to
Okay.
Mr. Sevy's original comments. We could actually do the OCP amendment and then the neighborhood plan amendment and then send that off, or they could happen concurrently. Presumably, if this were to pass, that would be the notification to Metro Vancouver, and then we would follow with the remainder. I think that what the concern is the time frame, because if this was to be something that's to be contemplated as a priority matter of council, meeting the December 1st or later November deadline would be the concern.
Okay, so yeah, that's helpful. I know it would never stop us as a council from going through an amendment process, but we just discussed the amendment process that City of Surrey kind of went through. They went something, but they had a special study special study area on that one. But on this particular one, we'd have to go through a process. So I think, and I don't want to, if council wishes to consider this as the amendment, that's fine. I think it'd be almost better to be standalone, in my opinion, because it's triggering an OCP amendment, which can at any time be submitted to Metro Vancouver as not part of the Metro 2050 update. That's my thoughts.
Can I speak to the motion?
So I'll let council make that decision. I think I'm not speaking for or against it. I'm just looking at the process that what we're doing today. This is greater than just saying here's our comments. This is actually triggering OCP amendment. But Councillor Woodward, I'll give you the floor.
Do you have a seconder for this amendment?
Yeah, Councillor Whitmar seconded it. So yeah. So Councillor Woodward, I'll let you speak to it, and perhaps with that background, it might help.
Yeah,
direction
so
to go.
I want to, maybe I should have spoken to it first before that. So really, I just want to clarify, these are comments that are going back to Metro Vancouver regarding the 2050 revision and consultation process. This is asking us for comments on the plan. I think it would be putting them on notice, putting Metro Vancouver on notice that we would like to, if this passes, we would like to prevent a 15-acre, single-story, single-use strip mall at 216th and 80th Avenue. That's the ultimate goal. So right here, right now, to add some mixed-use residential to that section of the Williams Neighborhood Plan, as I'm informed, would require amendments at Metro Vancouver. Why not go through that process right now and get some response from Metro Vancouver on what their position is and why they would prefer to see a strip mall of that size at that location rather than something that's more balanced, mixed use, and it seems to align with the objectives, the overarching visionary objectives of the Metro 2050 plan. So that's the ultimate goal here. These are just amending comments that are going back. So if that is rejected or accepted, that would then trigger some sort of a process outlined by the mayor. It would not be something that would be undertaken at this point by simply giving this feedback to Metro Vancouver, that right now they're the ones that are restricting the property owner from potentially adding and making a better development there, separate from a 15-acre strip mall next to farmland. So that is the objective with this. This seems to be the right place to do it, to start that conversation with Metro Vancouver. That's the sole objective of adding a comment. We're not amending any plans. We're not proceeding on processes for public hearings on Williams Neighborhood Plan. None of that's occurring here. This is a comment being added to comments, going back to Metro Vancouver for them to comment on and consider. The alternative would be for me, I guess, to go to the public hearing for the 2050 plan and present this directly to the Metro Board. I mean, I would prefer to do it by this process, working with this council to add it as a simple, basic comment that'll be added to many other comments which may not be considered or may be rejected by Metro Vancouver. They can put in writing back what their issues would be with doing this. It's very consistent with other changes they're making as well, regarding allowing for some flexibility under certain conditions for residential to be added to similar designations. So it's looking for that, for them to consider that, along with some other changes that they're making in that regard. So I find it very consistent. I don't find it to be as significant as outlined by the mayor in terms of binding this council to any sort of process whatsoever. It's to get some feedback from Metro Vancouver on which to me seems very logical, but to make more intensive use of these lands rather than hear from the property owner that they're not able to potentially consider this because it requires an amendment from Metro Vancouver, that it's not consistent with the regional growth strategy. I have no idea how urban planners at Metro Vancouver would tell me that a 15-acre strip mall is something that we should be doing. And so that is something that I would like to start, and that's the purpose of this additional comment. That's all it is. Again, is an additional comment to a bunch of other comments. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a point of clarification on this, if I may.
Okay, what's your clarification, Councilor Richter?
Okay, I think the problem here is that Metro has only the categories of general urban, which is residential, or mixed employment, which is commercial, light industrial. So it's almost like we need a third category of classification at the Metro level. And perhaps this motion needs to be amended to suggest that a third category, which combines both employment and residential, is created.
I could provide some context to that. I would also piece additional comment that the language that's written and provided was worked out with senior management over the past week or so. So the shall, I defer to Mr. Safi on that. And also too, that may be a reasonable additional comment to add, that some of these designations do provide significant inflexibility in regards to how we would want to use our land. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, further clarification for Mr. Safi is, as I understand it, the regional growth strategy is based on the underlying foundation is each municipality submits the regional context statement, which we have done, and as part of 2040, and to go through another regional context, that's where these changes are made. And so Metro Vancouver isn't designated it per se. They are because they've taken the regional context statement that we've submitted and included it in their regional growth strategy. So we're now saying we don't like our regional context statement, and we're changing it. So I'm very perplexed on I have no problem with the motion, but I almost think it's a standalone motion to trigger the other process. Perhaps you could help clarify if I'm wrong on that, because I thought the foundation was every municipality's regional context statement, which went through a public process, which they just taken, and as long as it's consistent with their overall objectives, incorporate in the regional growth strategy.
Your Worship, these are, again, matters that require significant and in-depth discussion, Your Worship, that may not be possible at a council level, at a council table, briefly, because each one of those topics requires, as I said, in-depth discussion, analysis, referral to maps, etc. I think what you're asking is, could this not be done independently? Yes, certainly it could be done independently. But our regional context statement that is part of the OCP, that is a link between the OCP and the RGS. It does not go into a level of detail that would preclude such a provision being made. Whether we incorporate the amendment or not, the fact remains that we will have to go through an amendment process of our OCP. I think your question, Your Worship, is more to do with whether that amendment should be done now. So let's amend the Williams plan to something other than what the current plan is or what the current contemplation is, and then ask Metro Vancouver to do it subsequently. Certainly, that is an approach that could be adopted by Council. I guess the issue ultimately boils down to is the broader, the higher level regional growth strategy accommodating of a change, and if so, is that change better done concurrently or prior to or following what we need to do locally?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that helps. I'll go through this because I just need that clarification. Councillor Richter, or Councillor Woodward, you've spoken, so Councillor Richter.
Yeah, well, like I say, I think the problem here is Metro, it's either urban, which is residential, or industrial or mixed employment, which is light industrial and commercial. That's the problem. Maybe the motion needs to be amended to include that specific clarification so that it can be sent forward as a comment on 2050. So it's about changing the categories that they're using. And that way it doesn't necessarily trigger a change in our bylaws right now, or our regional context statement. It's just saying, hey guys, you haven't thought through the categories that you've got, that you need to expand the categories. So I would suggest an amendment that's the gist of what we're sending forward here, and we use the Williams plan as an illustration of that.
Okay, thank you. I think that would be a separate to this, so we can go through this one, and if whatever happens, then certainly the language or the definitions of the different areas can be a subsequent motion.
Yeah.
Using this. as
Mr.
an
Mayor,
example.
should I take my hand down or just leave
Sure.
it? Because I still want to come to my
Yeah.
amendment, but
I'll-
I can take my hand down now and
And I'll
put it
come back
back
to you.
up.
And I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Council Long.
Boy, this is extremely frustrating. First of all, we're getting an amendment at 25 minutes before the meeting starts. Now I heard, and I'd like staff to answer this, Your Worship, through you, that this has been worked out with staff last week. That's what Councillor Woodward just said, that this has been worked out with senior staff, and we should maybe blame them if there's any wording that we don't agree with. But how can you drop this on a council table 25 minutes before the meeting? This is a substantial change to landowners' rights and objectives. I don't know if it's good or bad, because I only saw it 25 minutes before the meeting started. Actually, I didn't even see it then. I saw it even later, because we had to get other things going. So we've managed to take something that started on September 20th. We had a report a month later, then we had a deferral, and then we get the actual motion 25 minutes before the meeting starts. I don't understand how we can possibly really govern a community in this fashion when we're going to start dropping things on the fly. And these are major, major changes. So it may be good, may be bad, but this is not the way to deal with something as important as this. And I hear other amendments are being proposed by other councillors. So I would suggest, Your Worship, that we ask all these amendments to be put on the table pretty quickly here, refer them to staff, and have a full discussion at the next meeting on the ramifications of these, because I agree entirely with you. This is going through the back door. You're going to send this to Metro saying, well, this is the wrong designation, or you don't have the right designations. There's all kinds of other things here, but that's not what our neighborhood plan says. That's not what our RC says as well, which is what regional context statement doesn't say that currently. How it got there, I guess it went through a proper process to get where it is. Others, many on council may not agree with it, so I guess we should start a process to amend that, but not do it this way by sending it off to a regional governance organization, the Metro Vancouver, saying, hey, this is what we all agree with, when we only just saw it 20 minutes ago, if that. So, Your Worship, I really think the way to get out of this would be to do that, to refer this amendment, which apparently has been seconded. Another amendment is pending, and perhaps there's other amendments too. Maybe we give council until noon tomorrow or something like that. Get those over to staff. Staff does an analysis of them, whether they belong in this regional context statement or not, and suggest a roadmap or pathway by which we can accomplish them if that's what council so desires. But I don't think we're going to get anywhere today except more and more frustrated.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Frustrated at all. I find this is a very good discussion about topics that are extremely important to this council and the region, and we're a member of the region. We've been asked to comment on a number of things, and yeah, maybe we might have to send it back, because I actually have some questions about 211 and other ones regarding land use, regarding climate change and other things, particularly related to First Nations. So I know Metro Vancouver has it in their plan, but maybe it's not strong enough. So I think they're aware of that maybe they need to just put it in their plan. So I think this is a good. Now, my question to Mr. Safey, are you absolutely convinced that anything we do here would trigger an amendment before the board of Metro Vancouver, if I may?
Am I convinced that anything we do will trigger an amendment at Metro Vancouver?
That's correct.
I don't think, Your Worship, with respect, I don't think it's a question of what we do here in the Township of Langley. The process that Metro Vancouver itself has embarked upon will trigger an amendment to the Metro Vancouver RGS, regardless of whether we accept the changes as they're being contemplated by Metro Vancouver or if we wish to incorporate additional changes, that triggers an amendment to Metro Vancouver 2040 for it to become a Metro Vancouver 2050.
So if I may just to kind of clarify that, so whether it's Langley, whether it's Maple Ridge, Surrey, Delta, the list of all the number of members, doesn't matter, that would all be included in the discussion regarding the amendment at Metro Vancouver, if I may.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, that's what I wanted to know, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. I'm also not really frustrated. I'm not sure where the frustration comes from. I want to reiterate again, there seems to be some misunderstanding, which hopefully I can clarify. What I'm amending is not Metrofit 2050. I'm not amending any neighborhood plans. I'm not proposing to amend regional context statement. What I'm proposing to do is add a comment to a list of other comments, which would be collective feedback from council to Metro Vancouver staff. So, and then have them respond and comment on it. I thought I was doing the right thing, Councillor Long, by working with senior staff to come up forward with good language that would take use of the process that we have here right now, where other small changes are being made for other some parcels of land in the same situation potentially, where they're being given some flexibility in proximity to transit and other possibilities. Here we would look for some additional flexibility, given to the municipality and the property owner, and if Metro Vancouver is open to it, then we can consider it at that time. It's really just to get some response from Metro Vancouver on their position by making a comment in a list of comments, which is collective feedback. So I'm really not understanding, where some of these comments are coming from in terms of the process, and nobody blaming staff or anything. I don't know where that's coming from. It was worked out over 10 days. Nobody said it was finished 10 days ago and then sent 20 minutes ago. There was some changes made to it this morning. There was a call with Mr. Seffi this morning. So it was worked on over about a 10-day period, which was very positive, very constructive, and it's presented for your consideration. I mean, if people are in favor of single-story strip malls on 15 acres, then don't vote for this. But to me, this is the way to look at some amendments and to look through working with the process with Metro Vancouver, which is very consistent with what they're doing for some other parcels of land in the region, providing some additional flexibility. It's asking them to consider similar criteria for this piece of property here. That's all it's doing. It's asking them to look at it and give us some feedback. I really did not expect it to be controversial to this magnitude. It is not a process committing anybody to amend anything or start any bylaw process at all. It's asking for Metro Vancouver to respond whether they would consider some additional flexibility appropriate for this lot. And if they don't, they don't. And if they do, we can consider it at that time. That's it. That's all it is. And it's turned into this huge thing about, changing every plan and everybody's frustrated. Well, I think that's all just made up. It's really a very simple thing. Thank you.
Oh, well.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, well, it's not made up because it happened only in 20 minutes ago. So I guess the question to staff is, do they agree with this amendment, and would it trigger, as you said, Your Worship, and I think Council is led to understand, I'm not sure what the rest of the colleagues feel, that this would trigger a neighborhood plan amendment, would it not? Because it's talking about a different designation than we have currently. So that's the part that troubles me, whether it's the right one or the wrong one, does it or does it not trigger that?
Mr. Seffi? And that would be within our own process, I think.
Well, then we should go about that process. But it doesn't also mention, it's not really comments, because it says it's not
Mr.
supported,
Seffi.
and it says it shall this and shall that. So I think I need an answer like you're asking for from
I'll ask
staff.
Mr. Seffi to respond. Thank you.
Your Worship, just to make sure that I am actually responding to Council's direction and question, could you kindly repeat the question, Your
Yes.
Worship? Is it going to trigger an amendment to the Williams plan? Is that what the question is?
Yes, that's right. This amendment that's being proposed, would it trigger any changes to our plans that are not currently in existence? In other words, and would it trigger, as the mayor had said, public consultation and all kinds of other aspects of redesignating properties?
Your Worship, the question is not that complicated. However, I think I've said it earlier, and I'll repeat myself. With your indulgence, Your Worship, this will trigger an amendment, but so does the Metro Vancouver 2050 plan. Without this amendment that's currently being contemplated, that also triggers an amendment to our OCP. Now, specifically with Williams' plan, yes, it does. But regardless, there would have to be an OCP amendment by the Township of Langley. It may include this if it's approved by council. It may not include this if it's not approved by council. But the process remains the same, that being an amendment to our OCP and the RCS.
Okay, so it's.
So this is a new amendment because we're only just seeing it today, right? It's not, the other amendments that are required are part of the report and part of our planning, part of our neighborhood plans all along, I think. Anyway, which I still go back to my original suggestion that this be referred to staff, come back next week with a better explanation, perhaps something that's written down for us to understand and have more time to consider, and then we can have a presentation, have the report on the 18th of November, I think it is, and still have make the deadline of the 26th. So I'd like to make that motion whenever it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richter, did you want to speak to the amendment, or are you waiting for yours?
Yeah, I would like to propose an amendment to this amendment that's here and just put a prefacing statement in that these comments are intended solely as commentary on the situation that we face in the Williams Neighborhood Plan because of the categories that Metro 2050 uses in its plan. So that's going back then to what Councillor Woodward said, that he had put this forward strictly as a comment, not as something to trigger a context statement. So let's put that amendment in this by specifying up front, this is a comment, period.
Okay, sir. So the amendment, and maybe if I ask for a seconder, I'll wait for Ms. Bauer to capture that and then perhaps read it back to us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't write this one out.
So the amendment would read that these comments are intended solely as a commentary on the situation that Langley faces in the Williams Neighborhood Plan because of the categories that the Metro 2050 uses in its plan.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Amendment to the amendment. Councillor Woodward seconds it. So discussion on the amendment to the amendment. Councillor Richter, did you wish to speak to it?
No, I just think that we just need to clarify that this is an illustrative case of the need for a change in the categories that are used, the broad categories that are used in the Metro 2040 and 2050 plans. And I think if we put that clarification in, it's not going to trigger any problems for us down the road because it's just a commentary that we've sent forward on the overall plan.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, it's even more confusing. So I really think that staff should be able to help with the wording. They've got all the other 5 recommendations, comments, or whatever you wish to call them. We're suggesting to staff to add something like this to those comments and to justify it to us because no one else is on council is confused except me, thinking that this is actually changing a neighborhood plan. But that's what I think it's doing, so maybe staff will correct me on that when they come back to us. So I appreciate Councilor Richter trying to add an amendment to help things, but I think it makes it worse. Let's just get this over to staff to reword, rework, send it the way it is, add it to the comments, bring it all back with a presentation at the next meeting, and then we can move it forward from there. So I don't think I can support this amendment because I don't think that it helps.
Okay,
The amendment to the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Councillor Woodward's amendment is very specific, and to me, it hones right in on an area, and I don't think it should be used as a reference. I think it was intended to go right down to it's even got an address, 216th and 80th. So by saying Councillor Richter's motion, just comment, like I don't know if we should be commenting. I think we should comment and say we kind of want to do this. Because once we say this is just as an example, I don't know, I don't like that, because it takes the direction away, and you know, this draft, Councillor Woodward's motion is, we've had issues with strip malls before, and it kind of, I just hope it doesn't take away where he wants to take it. That's the only thing. We know if we say, well, it's just a comment, just an example, are they going to rate it? Like, oh, that doesn't mean anything then, right? It's got no teeth. But on the other hand, okay, thank you. Just my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Just a question through to staff, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead.
Mr. Sefi, there might be some confusion here that I'm proposing an amendment to the draft Metro 2050. Can you please confirm for me that I'm proposing an additional comment to a set of comments that staff have already prepared?
Your Worship, thank you for the opportunity. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's doing both. The amendment that is being discussed by Council is indeed to add a comment, again, as staff understands it, to add to the comments that staff had asked Council to endorse, a total of five set of comments. I believe I have them here. These 5 comments as a sixth point for Metro Vancouver staff at this stage to be aware of. That in itself does not trigger an amendment to the RGS, but holistically, everything put together as contemplated by Metro Vancouver staff does trigger an amendment to, in fact, that's the whole point. It's inherent with the process that they have commenced, which is to amend the 2040 plan to a 2050 plan. So this will be a point amongst a series of points to consider as part of the amendment process.
Yeah, so I think there is some confusion in there. So what I'm looking for, and I thought we had discussed, and I think is in the motion, is that this is to be added as a 6th comment, very similar in scope and quality and intent as the other 5, to provide specific feedback for Metro Vancouver to consider. So if they don't agree with it, then that would be a process that would embark. It sounds very similar to the Campbell Heights process. If they do agree with it, then it would be something for us to consider and reject later on based upon their feedback. And if they do consider it, nothing binds us to modifying the designation in the Williams Neighborhood Plan. Do I have that correct, Mr. Sevi?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, so to me, I don't know why we would add I mean, I appreciate the intent to try to help, but we're adding the fact that it's a comment to something that is a proposed comment. So I'm not really clear, again, where a lot of this confusion is coming from. Thanks.
Thank you. And hence the number of questions. Councillor Long, did you?
We're trying to make a referral, and I think that's the way to move out of this. Can we refer this to
you,
staff?
You can refer if you wish.
Because we're going to have to come back and
So-
pass something that's clean, and this, right now, it's got some new pieces
Just to
on
be
it.
clear, we're on an amendment to the amendment. Perhaps we should let that go through, and then if you want to refer the amendment as amended or not amended,
Well,
that might
I'd
be
like
the
to refer
time.
both amendments, because I'm not sure which
Yeah.
one's helping. Everyone's trying to help. So let's refer the
So-
whole thing to staff to come back with something.
But I can only refer what's in front of us. So right now, it's just the amendment to the amendment, but if you wanted to wait, you could refer the amendment, because that still has to come back, whether this passes or not.
Well,
I'm just suggesting, because otherwise you're going to make two referral motions.
Well, let's get clear on, can't we?
Ms. Bauer can maybe help me with my interpretation of proper procedure.
Want to refer the
motions.
whole thing.
Can we do that? Motion to refer both amendment and because we're on amendment to the amendment, so can we have a motion to go back?
Really close it though, shouldn't you? Yeah.
I'm just not
Our
sure.
interpretation was we would have to close off the amendment before we could refer the whole thing.
Yeah, that's my interpretation.
Well,
Okay.
but there's two
So-
amendments. We have to close both of them off?
No, so, yeah, we do. So, no, we don't have to close it off.
Oh.
We can refer, if, I mean, this one is an amendment to the amendment. You could have a referral to this one. Then you'd have to come back when we go to the amendment as amended or not amended, whatever happens to this, and then refer that also. So it's the same thing, but you can only do one at a time.
Well, I don't agree because the.
Okay, well, I've ruled on it.
No,
so
no,
you-
well,
yeah,
well,
I've ruled
just a
on it.
minute.
So that's
No,
what I'm
you
asking
can
you
rule
to
on
do.
it, but
Yeah.
my comment would be that we're trying to get ourselves out of what we're,
that's right.
out of the situation. So
So you can make
better
an
to
amendment.
refer everything to staff and come back with something new. But anyhow,
So
however you want to do it.
Yeah, if, Ms. Bauer, there's, I guess, the interpretation that I'm understanding is that you can refer the amendment to the amendment, but you can't refer the amendment. But you have to get to that point first. So we deal with this one, then get to the amendment as amended, then refer the whole thing if Councillor Long wishes and if council agrees.
I think it would just have to be very carefully worded so that we could refer the whole thing, make it very clear that we are referring the amendment, although we'd have no decision on the amendment to the amendment, so.
That's right. So when it comes back after the referral, then we can discuss it because we'll have the information we're looking for.
Then,
I think the best way to maybe if we're going to refer the whole thing is just to refer the whole thing as it stands now and specify that the amendment to the amendment is included in the referral.
And that's what I tried to do. Your Worship.
okay, so we're just trying to clarity. So, and that means the whole motion, right from the beginning.
Yes, that would be the whole motion as well as the discussion that staff has heard and the amendments that are currently on table.
Okay, that's helpful. So, Council Long, I think that's, do you want to move
Yes,
the
yes,
entire
the
motion
entirety,
with the
yeah.
included amendments
Yeah.
to staff to come back and provide clarity on the two amendments? Is that,
Yep. And
I don't think there's much dispute on what staff have given us. I think that's what we're looking for. Councillor Coons seconds that referral. That'll come back at the next meeting, and that still gives us time. That's the 22nd, I believe, and we have till the 26th. Does that still give us time? Or
just barely.
Mr. Seffi?
Yes, it will, Your Worship. As I recall, the next meeting with council is in 3 weeks, which is the 22nd of November. The Metro Vancouver request is to provide comments, feedback prior to November 26th.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Your Worship, can I add to that? I know that Councillor Richter had an amendment too. Can we include that?
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Richter. Councillor
Not just the
No, I
amendment.
think my amendment is quite
It's
clear and simple. It's not complicated like
it's
this one.
included. She included it in
You mean
this.
the Aquifer one?
No, she's included it in the amendment to the amendment.
Cool, okay.
Okay, so.
No, Mr. Mayor, I haven't even put it on the table yet. It
I'm
hasn't
sorry.
even
Yeah,
been
okay.
seconded.
Okay. Councillor Woodward. On the amendment to the amendment.
Yeah, that was.
Or the
gonna be-
referral, sorry, the
Now
referral.
that we're on the referral, that was
Yeah.
going to be my question as well. If the main motion is referred away, I don't know if Councillor Richter would still be able to amend it, or we can just include hers in the presentation next week, next meeting as well. That would be my hope, that
Okay.
there, any
Yeah.
proposed council changes are treated the same way.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
There could be.
So
some-
Councillor
So
Richter's. yeah.
however you procedurally
I'll-
make that
I'll ask-
happen, I
so
would like
Councillor
to see that
Richter's-
in the presentation as
Yeah,
well.
Councillor Richter's comments were captured by staff. Mr. Backen, is that something you can include in?
I think so, Your Worship. This want to be crystal clear so we can take it away, and that is we're going to refer the report or the materials under N1. We're going to refer the amendment. We're going to refer the amendment to the amendment to staff, and we heard clarity. I think it's actually for a presentation, or is there some language you wish to add to give us the direction to?
I think
to
for
bring-
presentation to staff to provide further input on the amendments and also Councillor Richter's comments, which are sort of embedded in to do with the terminology. So
Well, I
think,
did send a worded motion to the clerk,
Okay.
but I haven't had a chance to
No.
put it on the table yet.
I'm worried if we dispose of this referral, then there's no chance for you to put it on the table. So I'm just trying to work my way through it.
So, Your Worship, then it's for a presentation to comment and provide clarity. And just to be so we're very clear, it's actually the amendment to the amendment, and then the motion that was contemplated, which can be done as part of the presentation by Councillor Richter as to the aquifers and the impact on the aquifers.
That's right. Councillor Richter, does that capture what you wish to have brought forward next week?
Oh, I just think this is silly what we're doing now. I mean,
Well,
yeah,
it's process has
I
to
mean,
follow.
we've taken something that's very simple, add comments to reports, and turned it into a major crisis.
Okay.
I'm not supporting a referral. We just need to deal with this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Ferguson? Or do you want to-
I just wanted to point out whether myself or other members have some other just comments. My comment was, it's in their package, but to take, and but it's not written down. They talk in their package, this is the Metro Vancouver's package about working with First Nations, but they don't include what that work would be, and I was hoping on a comment that they would take into consideration the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, which was accepted by the Government of Canada, and also the National Day reflecting on the Truth and Reconciliation, whether those comments would be discussed by Metro as well. I'm not sure if that's something I could include prior to the right time, or whether today the staff can just take those into consideration.
Yeah, I think they can take into consideration if you want to make that a comment.
Yeah, I just
We can
like
add
a
it next
just a
meeting.
comment.
Yeah, okay.
Just want to make it a little
Sure.
bit clearer, and it really makes Vancouver look, Metro Vancouver look really good on that. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Arneson? Not yet.
There.
When Ms.
I'm ahead
Mauer
of
is
the game.
multitasking over there, so.
Thank you. I just had a question of clarification, actually. I was wondering, through your worship to staff, then, what would be the timeline for other opportunities for input going forward? So today, we have a number of amendments that are being put forward. Could we create a structure around by a certain date that staff would be willing to receive some? I mean, I have not put together something that's very comprehensive. I'd like to have something about green infrastructure, but I'd like to have the opportunity in the next 3 weeks then, with a reasonable timeline for staff to deal with it, to put that forward, rather than just, throwing something at it today.
Mr. Bracken?
Your worship, that certainly could be done. It may require an amendment to the deferral, which would include something to the effect of and such other comments or clarifications that council provides prior, within the next 7 days or something.
Yeah, I think that would be fair. So,
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
okay, then that covers, I think, Councillor Richter's, yours issues. I'm going to take that as unanimous consent. As an amendment. Okay, amendment to the referral. Yeah, sorry. Well, no, the 7 days that they provide the.
7 days, okay?
Let me finish. The 7 days they have to provide it to staff, so it gives staff time to, I mean, after this discussion, I think members of council have had a lot of information. They can provide a written request to staff to include in their presentation comments that will come back, and that's 3 weeks away. So it gives staff at least 2 weeks to work on it. So I think that's fair. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the referral. All those in favor? Take the screen down. Opposed? Carries.
I'm opposed,
Oh,
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Richter is opposed. It carries. All right. I think that disposes of and one for today. Move on to other business. And we go down to Councillor Richter. You have a motion, number 2. Election and political science.
Yep, and I'll move my motion.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor, it's on the agenda. It's therefore be resolved, Council amend the election political signs bylaw to prohibit all municipal election signs on township property, and it's been seconded by Councillor Woodward. Any discussion?
Okay, yes,
Oh, yeah,
I'd
go
like
ahead.
to
Go
speak
ahead,
to it,
Councillor Richter.
yes.
Yeah.
In the last federal election, it became very, very clear that because of the growth within the township and growth in terms of size as well as traffic, it's no longer safe for volunteer crews to be out there on the roads putting signs up. It's just not safe. Traffic is going by too fast. Traffic is, and if it's a contentious election like the last election federally was, there's a lot of negativity and animosity generated towards sign crews that are installing these signs on publicly owned lands. I think we need to take a page out of Surrey's book and the city's book and any of the other municipalities who have just said no more signs on publicly owned lands. Let's just stick to putting signs on privately owned lands where the crews are going to be safe going and putting those signs up, because they're not safe when they're out on the roadsides doing it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I appreciate the motion. I mean, I do have some concerns about going this far for the city of Langley and so on, but I've kind of reached the same point watching the last couple of elections, actually, 3 specifically, where, essentially only one group gets to have signs up. That's one issue. The other issue is the enforcement process is essentially broken. Sort of trying that this time a little more thoroughly. Education is not working. I think we've seen that now for a couple of elections, that we try to educate sign crews and they adjust. But then, that education process occurs early in the 3-week period. But then on the last 3 or 4 days, why do I have to see one campaign in particular putting up signs in blatant violation of the bylaw? And so, again, the crews can't, the bylaw department can't enforce it quickly enough before election day to get them all. And obviously the crews know that. So I've grown tired of it. I've grown extremely tired of the destruction of the signs. I've grown extremely tired of the blatant violations of the bylaw multiple days before the election, only occurring from one campaign particularly, mostly. And I think it's disturbing, and I'm pretty frustrated by it, seeing that process sort of blatantly ignored, enforcement being nearly impossible. So I would like to, at least here in the township anyway, so I'd like to seriously consider this in terms of looking at a bylaw amendment that severely restricts the usage into certain areas at the very least now. I've reached that point, again, having watched multiple elections, and move these onto private property and allow private property owners to deal with it, where it can be installed safely as well, via access to private property, and not seeing people on the side of the road, and in one case almost getting hit by a car, and other issues where people are trying to put them up in good spots but with limited access for vehicles to stop and so on. I don't know how this is enforced safely, and again, I've reached the point where it does seem that only one group gets to have signs up. Thanks.
Thanks. Councilor Whitmarsh?
Thanks, Your Worship. I know that we spent considerable time discussing this bylaw over the last year and a half or so. We met a number of occasions as a council to discuss it. We put in some additional limitations for election signs. I want us to be a safe community, and I'm concerned about safety. But I am also concerned about making sure that we have a very open and fair democratic process for all candidates who may want to run in the election. So, I want us to be very careful about putting in significant restrictions that might make it more difficult for new people to consider running for council or other elected roles in our community, whether that's at the provincial or federal level. So I think we've had one election since the new sign bylaw and changes were in, the 21-day restriction, and while there may have been some real concerns with safety, I'm not sure that at this time I want to make a significant change. There may be some things that we can address in a smaller way, but this seems like a very significant change to limit it, and I think limit the possibility for new people to consider elected roles in our community, whatever level of government they choose to run for. So I would like to keep that as open as we can, and so at this time I'd probably prefer to keep at least 1 or 2 more elections with the new bylaw as opposed to making a decision after one election. And I certainly saw signs from all different candidates in the last election, so I'm not sure how it is that only one seems to be having signs, because certainly in my area there was numerous signs from all different candidates in my area where I live and where I drive, so I didn't see that as being a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Long?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on either of those aspects. Because it wasn't pointed out to me at any time about a road safety issue, although I can understand there being one because I put signs out myself, and I don't know anything about who put signs up and whether it's been done with the proper bylaw or with the enforcement or whatever. But certainly if this particular motion is specifically talking about road safety, and I think staff are listening to us, perhaps they could look at other municipalities and find a way that we could put out some kind of a manual or some kind of an agreement with the candidate, saying this is some of the rules of how you put up signs, and what you should be wearing vests, and you should be doing this and this, that, and the other thing, addressing the road safety issue if one truly exists. I mean, theoretically, you're not going to be. I mean, you're in danger anytime you're on the road, right? So that I'm not trying to minimize the concerns that are being raised here, but I don't think that banning them is the answer. Certainly education in this respect, because we didn't discuss this particular aspect that I recall when we amended the bylaw. We talked about signs and the number of signs and so forth, but we didn't say, hey, there's, and we did do safety in terms of sign proximities to intersections and so forth. So maybe we need to go another step, and that is to make sure that the candidates sign an agreement of some kind so that they can inform their sign crews on the safe way to erect a sign on, in township property, but I don't think I want to see them banned.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward? Oh, sorry, Councillor Ferguson's first time speaker. Councillor Ferguson, then I'll go back to Woodward. Councillor Ferguson.
Well, you know, signs can indeed be a menace for the community. Let's face it. I think I'm glad that Councillor Richter is bringing this up. I mean, I hate to tell the public, it's getting worse out there for sign. It is getting worse, and Langley's getting a busier community, but it's getting worse. And the fact is that folk knocking down legally erected signs, it's a challenge. And many of us I see, I'm not alone, you drive by a site, I'm not going to mention any party because they probably affects everybody. You drive by a site and the signs are down. They're smashed down. And you drive, the people put them up again because they want to see they've got the right to do so. And then the next day they're knocked down again. It's you kind of wonder, well, that's a real menace. And it's not the candidate's fault. It's people out there doing them. Perhaps maybe people are looking for other things, challenge. They also write things, profanities that the children can see, which is again a menace. It's a challenge. Now, as Councillor Richter has proposed, if we put it on private property or property owned by private citizens, then it's probably not as likely to happen as much as long as they're set back, and that way they're not put in front of stop signs or telephone poles or other things. So. I think it's a good compromise. That way, all candidates will have we're all playing the same, same field and the same rules and regulations. So, it's a good compromise, I believe. As I say, signs are a menace, and there is a safety concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to clarify some of the comments. This is not banning political signs. This is restricting them to private property, of which there's plenty, and there's lots all along these corridors, and it would solve the safety issue. The whereas mentions safety, but there are safety issues beyond just putting them up and taking them down. There are relations to intersections, which I think I've seen now for multiple campaigns, multiple elections, that just aren't obeyed. And people know the bylaw, and they just blatantly violate it after being educated for a week or two. And I saw that specifically in the most recent campaign, and I've reached the point where I believe they have become a menace. I think a menace is the right word. This isn't some drastic, great step forward. This is aligning ourselves with other municipalities in the region. So Surrey being the prime example, who I think have proven that you can still see lots of signs and get the word out with signs if that's the strategy that people want to embark upon. I don't see it as a restriction of democracy by any means. I see it as protection and an even playing field for all, where people can locate their signs on private property and not place them all over the place on intersections when they know that's against the bylaw 2 days before Election Day. I think it has reached the point where they're a menace, and so I support this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, got another. Councillor Davis snuck in at the end.
Well, the signs are a menace. I didn't realize how bad they are until I ran for politics. It didn't bother me before. I didn't see anybody when I didn't have to put my own signs up, it wasn't such an issue. I just thought, oh, well, there's a sign. I think in this, if it's targeting safety, a significant road safety, if I look at how this amendment is written, traffic nowadays is unbelievable. And the best place to put a sign is always where there's hardly any room, and you got to pull your truck over, and the right hand, if there's myself and two kids, I make them get out the ditch side. They just about fall in the ditch, and then we got to figure out a way, and wham bam, and we got it all figured out. It is, if it's on a safety issue, I think I'm ready to support this. On the other hand, I don't know if I'm really ready to do this yet, because I know when I was young and I first ran and threw my hat in the ring, putting signs up was exciting. My stupid face, all that crap. And I think that it is a way to I hope we're not going to be looked upon as taking away opportunity for new candidates, because sometimes, you buy 100 or 200 signs and you stick them up. That's a significant impact. You're trying. You're not just putting your name on the ballot and not doing anything. You're actually, and it is. I hope so. As a safety issue, I think that I will agree that I'll support this. But I know I'm going to get in flack a little bit from some people that I'm taking away the opportunity for the next candidates in the next meeting. So kind of going to hold one eye, plug my nose, and I'm going to vote for this in the name of safety. Councillor Richter.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't going to actually speak to this, but I think it's becoming the scope of the conversation has been focused, as I'll admit that the actual motion suggests that significant road safety concerns. I agree with Councillor Whitmarsh. We spent a lot of time talking about this, and without any significant other input. I haven't seen a study. I haven't seen anything except people's anecdotal information about the concerns about people potentially getting run down. And I guess in the abstract, I could see that that would be a problem. But if that's what we're only going to focus on, then I have a problem with how we're analyzing the situation. Because I think there does have to be a balancing of the interests. So I'm not speaking against public safety. That would be totally wrong interpretation of my comments. But I am speaking to the fact that if this motion suggests that we are only going to allow people to put signs on private property, how does that impact people who have recently moved to the community? I mean, really, you have to look at the opportunity that people have to know somebody and then be able to have some kind of established way to connect with that individual and then ask them, can I put a sign on your lawn? Well, maybe we're not particularly sympathetic to that situation, but I'd say we're here because of the result of what was facilitated in the past, which was the allowance of signage. I agree with Councillor Whitmarsh. We should not be putting obstacles in the way of individuals who otherwise have an uphill battle to get their name known. Do I like signs all over the countryside? No, but we've had a conversation about limiting the number of signs, and we didn't really go for that either, and the size of signs. I think that this is a challenging conversation, but I don't think that today, sitting here, I am prepared to support this motion, because I do feel, and I've talked to people who have, within the last 6 months, expressed an interest in running, and my first thought to them is, does anybody know who you are? Well, if nobody knows who you are, and you can't put a sign up and make a connection in people's minds between who you are and, seeing this sign there, I don't think it's going to be very helpful to people. And we want to encourage a diversity of individuals to be able to run and be successful in our community more than anything. So if I'm balancing those interests, I would still say that I prefer to have some limited, which we already have done. We've limited based on council input so far, where people can put their signs. So we're not allowing them to put in places where before we deemed based on feedback they weren't appropriate. So I'm pretty okay with the way things are now. And I think that if we're going to have a further structural issue about this, it should be within the context, not necessarily of the standalone motion, but it should be in the context of further discussing the overall policy around elections and election signage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Supporting it either, although it would be to my benefit. Because I know lots of people that I could probably put a sign up on private property, which is the kind of the reason that I don't think it's really fair, because if you're a new person, it's going to be really challenging to find those people that would put a sign up, because really, there's not too many people that actually want a sign up on their private property either. So, so for that reason, I just want to keep it as fair as possible for new people, because that's how we get good people running if things are fair and equal. So I won't be supporting it either.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I certainly, public safety is critically important, but I'm not sure how this change here really changes that. If, I'm hearing that people were breaking rules or not following the rules up to 2 and 3 days prior to the election. I don't see how that would change. If someone wants to break the rules, they'll now just 2 or 3 days before stick their signs on public property, and they'll still break the rules. It'll just be a different way they've broken the rules. I'm not sure really how it prevents, how it deals with public safety. And I do want us to be as safe as we can. And if we need to adjust how far they are from an intersection or something like that, even further than we do, even though I think we've done a pretty good job in restricting that. Certainly I don't support vandalizing of signs or any of that. This bylaw doesn't deal with that. It has nothing to do with vandalization of signs. It is about restricting them on public or private property. And I always think it is challenging to set rules for something that benefits those members who are currently on council. So we're setting a set of rules that benefits ourselves. I guess I'm not supportive of that. And while I want safety, and I encourage us to be safe, and I encourage us to all follow the rules, regardless of what those rules are, I don't think we need to go this far. It'll just add another rule that can be broken as opposed to stopping that. So I think we should stay with the plan we have in place and move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, well, the plan that we have in place isn't working because of it not being followed, and because of, I think, the unnecessary risks that people take in either trying to damage signs, which then generates the risk of having to go out and replace signs. But on a safety issue, I have one question I'd like to ask Mr. Backen, through you, Mr. Mayor, and that is, if someone is hurt putting a sign up or damaging a sign, is the township liable for that? Because I think we're headed more in that direction than any other direction right now.
Mr. Backen.
Generally, Your Worship, we would not be unless there was some sort of zone we were requiring them to go into, or there was a process we required them to go through. If we actually set a policy or process, we must do so in such a way that we're ensuring there's no negligence involved with the application of that policy or process. But if we go down that path, then we could have some liability. At this point, though, with our approach towards signs, because we have no designated areas per se, or probably like one area or two areas we see the city do, or we have any specific safety brochures or manuals in terms of how to do it, we should be okay.
Thank you. All right, I will now call the question on the election political signs. All those in favor? And opposed? So we got Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Arneson, Mayor Froese, Councillor Kuntz, Councillor Long, Councillor Davis opposed. It fails. Is there any other business? And with Councillor Whitmarsh, your hand is still up. Is that from before? Okay. Okay, so I now need a motion to resolve into special closed for the items on the agenda. I have a motion, Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Kuntz. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. And a motion to terminate. Councillor Davis and seconder. Councillor Kuntz, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. So we'll take 10? Or, yeah, come back at 3:45? Okay. Give you 13 minutes.